In January of 1980, two brothers from Texas quietly controlled roughly 195 million ounces of silver, and they were not finished buying. Their paper fortune in that single metal was measured in billions of dollars, and the price was still climbing toward $50 an ounce. These were not traders in some back office. They were sons of one of the richest oil men who ever lived. And within a few short weeks, that mountain of silver would help turn them into what were then the largest debtors in financial history. This is the story of how Nelson Bunker Hunt and Herbert Hunt tried to buy up the silver market, and how one Thursday in March took it all away. To understand the silver, you first have to understand the father, a Texas wildcatter named H.L. Hunt. H.L. Hunt struck oil in the great East Texas field and became, by some accounts, one of the wealthiest men on the planet. He raised a sprawling family, and among his sons were Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt and William Herbert Hunt. Bunker, the heavier and louder of the two, inherited both an oil fortune and a deep suspicion of paper money. He watched the inflation of the 1970s eat away at the dollar and decided that cash in the bank was a slowly melting ice cube. Gas lines stretched around the block, prices climbed every month, and Bunker Hunt wanted something the government could not simply print more of. Gold ownership had been restricted for ordinary Americans for decades, so Bunker turned his eye to silver instead. Silver was real, it was scarce, and it had been used as money for thousands of years. For a man who trusted metal over promises, it looked like the perfect place to park a dynasty's wealth. Bunker was famously plain in his habits, flying coach and eating cheap, yet he thought in numbers most people cannot imagine. And what he imagined was owning so much silver that the metal itself would have to rise. The Hunts began accumulating silver in a serious way back in the early 1970s. By the middle of that decade, they had already gathered tens of millions of ounces of the metal. Bunker did not just want futures contracts, those paper promises to deliver silver later. He wanted the actual bars, the physical metal, taken out of the exchange and locked away. That single habit is what made him so dangerous to the market. Most futures traders never take delivery, they just settle in cash and roll their bets forward. When you demand the real silver instead, you shrink the supply that everyone else is trading. The Hunts even arranged to fly silver bullion out to secure storage, some of it reportedly overseas. Every ounce they hauled away was an ounce the rest of the market could no longer touch. This is the quiet mechanic behind cornering a market. You buy the promises and then demand the goods. For years it was a slow burn, as silver drifted along under $10 an ounce. But the Hunts kept adding patiently, like a man filling a reservoir one bucket at a time. And by the late 1970s, that reservoir was about to overflow. In 1979, the buying went from patient to frantic. The Hunts joined forces with wealthy partners from Saudi Arabia through a company called International Metals Investment. Together, this group had the oil money to buy silver on a scale no ordinary speculator could match. From the summer of 1979 to the start of 1980, the silver they controlled roughly doubled. On the last day of July in 1979, their controlled position sat at around 123 million ounces. By the first day of 1980, it had climbed to roughly 195 million ounces of silver. To picture that, imagine a single private group holding a huge slice of all the silver in the world that governments did not own. As they bought, the price obeyed, exactly as Bunker had gambled it would. Silver had traded below $10 an ounce before August of 1979. By the last day of that year, it closed at $34.45. Anyone holding silver was suddenly, spectacularly richer on paper. Other investors piled in behind the Hunts, hoping to ride the rocket upward. The exchanges that hosted silver trading watched their warehouses drain and their nerves fray. Because a true corner has a cruel endgame for everyone on the other side of the trade. If the Hunts really owned the metal, then the traders who had promised to deliver silver had none to give. Those sellers would have to buy back at any price the Hunts demanded, and that is where fortunes get made or destroyed. In the middle of January of 1980, the madness reached its peak. On January 17th, an ounce of silver cost $49.45, nearly 5 times its price months earlier. Silver had gone from under $10 to almost $50 in roughly half a year. On paper, the Hunt holdings were worth billions upon billions of dollars. Across America, the price spike triggered a genuine silver rush among ordinary people. Families dug out old silver coins, tea sets, and jewelry to sell before the price could fall. Refineries and coin shops had lines out the door as the public melted heirlooms for cash. Silverware that had sat in drawers for generations was suddenly worth a small fortune. Photographic companies and silversmiths who needed the metal to work watched their costs explode. The whole economy of silver had been bent around the appetite of two brothers from Dallas. It was, for a brief moment, one of the most audacious market positions ever assembled by private individuals. Bunker Hunt had set out to prove that real metal beat paper money, and the ticker seemed to agree. But a corner is only as strong as your ability to keep holding, and the rules were about to change underneath him. The people who ran the exchanges were watching a handful of players warp their entire market. In January of 1980, the New York exchange, known as COMEX, took drastic action. It brought in emergency measures, including the now famous Silver Rule 7. In plain terms, the exchange restricted trading to liquidation only for most speculators. That meant you could sell your silver positions, but you could no longer easily pile into new ones. Overnight, the buying pressure that had powered the whole climb was choked off. The Hunts could no longer keep pushing the price higher by simply buying more. At the same time, the Federal Reserve under Paul Volcker was slamming the brakes on the whole economy. Interest rates were driven brutally high to fight the very inflation Bunker had feared. Borrowing money to hold silver suddenly became far more expensive. With no new buyers allowed and credit tightening, the silver price stopped climbing and began to sag. And a leveraged bet that stops going up is a very dangerous place to be standing. As silver slid, the Hunts faced the ugliest phrase in all of finance, the margin call. A margin call is a demand to put up more cash to back a losing bet right now in real money. The Hunts had borrowed enormously to build their silver mountain, so falling prices meant mounting demands for cash. They had metal worth billions, but they did not have that kind of ready money sitting in an account. On Thursday, March 27th of 1980, the day that earned the name Silver Thursday, the trap sprang shut. The brothers failed to meet a margin call of about $100 million owed to the brokerage Bachet. Word spread that the Hunts could not pay, and the market did what markets do to the wounded. Silver went into free fall as everyone rushed to sell at once. On that single day, the price of silver collapsed to around $10.80 an ounce. The metal had lost roughly half its value in a matter of hours. The same leverage that had magnified the Hunts' paper gains now magnified their very real losses. Their unpaid balance threatened to drag the brokerage Bosch down along with them. In one afternoon, the greatest silver bet in history had turned into the greatest silver disaster in history. The fear was not just about two rich brothers losing money. Regulators worried that if the Hunts collapsed, they could take major Wall Street firms down with them. To stop a wider panic, a group of banks arranged an enormous rescue loan of about $1.1 billion. That loan was tied to the Hunt family's oil and gas assets, effectively mortgaging the empire to survive. Bunker Hunt, once counted among the richest men alive, had become one of the largest debtors in history. The losses from the silver adventure ran into the billions of dollars. Then came the years of reckoning in courtrooms and hearing rooms. Bunker and Herbert were hauled before Congress to explain how two men had shaken the silver market. Bunker, ever defiant, insisted he had simply been a smart investor buying something real. In 1988, a jury found the Hunts had conspired to corner the silver market in a case brought by a Peruvian firm called Minpeco. They were ordered to pay well over $100 million in damages from that fight. That same year, Bunker and Herbert Hunt filed for personal bankruptcy protection. In 1989, they settled with commodity regulators, were each fined $10 million, and were banned from American commodity markets. The men who tried to own all the silver in the world ended up owing much of it back. The lesson, from one owl who has read a lot of ledgers, is that borrowed money turns a clever bet into a loaded spring pointed at your own fortune. If you enjoy watching giant money mistakes so you never have to make them yourself, perch here and subscribe to Money Mechanics, because Sterling always has another cautionary tale.